All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arts Lunch. I'm Jennifer Oz-Freeman, and we're really excited to have with us today Allison Jones, who's a longtime friend and collaborator with the Theology and Arts program. Friend of United and artist extraordinaire. So I'll let you say more things about your background in art making if you want. Really looking forward. I think all of the textile artists have come out of the woodwork. You can see the energy that textiles bring. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And thank you everyone for coming. I'm so excited to see such a good turnout. And yeah, like Jennifer said, I'm a friend of United. My partner, Max Bromberg-Kraus, was a student and a worker at United for many years. And while they were involved here, I was a very active community member and came to many, many arts lunches and talks and gallery shows, and feel that I really kind of got a secondhand seminary education. So now I'm here to try and pay it forward, I guess. I'm also a textile artist. I work mostly in hand embroidery, but I like to dabble. And I'm here today to talk about a zine project that I started a few years ago called Social Fabric. So that will be the focus of my talk today.
Okay.
Yes, that sounds great. We can just jump right in, if that's cool with everybody. So while Jennifer is pulling it up, I can just talk a little bit about what this project is. So Social Fabric is an anthology, and I forgot to put a slide in here about what is a zine, because I'm so immersed in the zine world that is very obvious, but of course it isn't. So zine, my definition is a self-published magazine, basically. The most simple terms. They have their roots in punk subcultures and DIY, so it's very much supposed to be a really accessible medium, both for the people making it and the people reading it. And so that's kind of the roots of this project. Is I wanted to make a really community-based and community-centered project about the meanings that textile objects hold for us as all people, not only as textile artists, but everybody in the world has relationships to textile objects in one way or another. And I was really interested to explore this by inviting people to reflect on some prompts, and this is the project that came out of that. So Social Fabric is the name of the zine. Next slide, please. So I want to give everybody a heads up that there will be some audience participation requested of you. So I just wanted to give you the prompts up front so that you can have it in the back of your mind as I'm talking. So there will be an opportunity for some show and tell. If anybody happened to bring an object with them, I'm really excited to see it. And if not, that's fine. You can describe it to us and we will create rich mental images of your object. And so some of the things I want you to think about, I know this is a lot of prompts and questions, so don't feel like you have to answer all of them. Look at them for a minute and just think, is any of this bringing up things for me? So some of the ways that you can think about your textile object are, what is alive in this object? Whose lives has it witnessed? And some of the things that you can think about to dig deeper into this are, who made it? If it was a commercial product at any point in its life cycle, who was selling it? Who might have handled it on the various steps in its journey to get to you? Who else might have owned or used this object before you? How does this object connect you with other people and with the earth? So these are the core of what I'm trying to get people to think about. Another thing you can think about is what truths are revealed through this object. And if you want to get a little bit extra woo about it, what is its power? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means to me, the power of a textile object. So again, you don't have to memorize these. I'll have this up again at the end, but I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that I will be asking you to participate. So I'm going to go back to the very early conception and some of the philosophy and some of the things I was thinking about when I conceptualized Social Fabric. And one of the first moments I can remember these themes becoming important to me was in about 2017. I was on a tour of the Minneapolis Institute of Art, which is now my employer. And we stopped in front of, I believe, this exact cradle cover. As you can see, it's from 1885. It's a Lakota piece of art. And I was struck in that moment by the just the incredible amount of work and time that it took to cover this piece in beads. And I have this excerpt from the didactic that was next to it that is now from it's on the MIA website that I'll read out loud. Cradle covers were usually made by the relatives of the child and given to the mother to use when the baby arrives. Cradles play an important function because it nestles the child, and the cradle can be worn on the mother's back or put on the side of a horse. Highly decorated ones are especially prized because it is symbolic of the pride and love of the child and illustrates the skill of these artists. And I remember being verklempt in front of this piece of art, looking at it and thinking about how each stitch was done with the intention to celebrate and protect and love the child who was going to be enrobed in this object. And it hit me in that moment that in doing that process, it's like magic in some ways. It transforms this item into something that's greater than just the sum of its materials. There's like a really profound process happening there when you take the time to hand embellish something like this, especially with the intention of giving it to a particular individual. And so that got the ball rolling on me thinking about the importance of textiles and what are some of the kind of spiritual elements of textile work. And at that point, I had been on and off doing hand embroidery, so I was very familiar with the sort of the nature of doing this hand work and the specialness of doing something by hand that can be done by machine and kind of choosing to take the inefficient route to make something because the process does something important to the final thing. It's not just about creating an object, it's about something that happens during the process. And I brought this jacket that I will try to show people on Zoom. This is something that I made as a teenager. I bought it from a thrift store and I bleached it. I embroidered on it. I bought this patch on the internet and I sewed it onto the back. I don't know if folks on Zoom can see this rat with a flower crown, very Tumblr, which was my thing. I made these weird patches out of yarn and I sewed them on the sleeves. And I saw a lot of parallels between this cradle cover and this, which is a super different object, you know, super different cultural context, but the process felt very similar to me of adorning something. And when I wore this jacket, it felt like putting on some kind of a magical garment that had protective qualities and comforting qualities to me. Next slide. And then at the same time, like I was thinking about the ways that textiles and fabrics are really potent metaphors for like really foundational things about our lives and about our experience of the world. And this is a quote that's probably familiar to many of you from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail, which I just reread in full around Advent time. And this line, which is, you know, incredibly widely shared, always strikes me. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. What a profound sentiment, and something that I try to keep at the forefront of my life philosophy at all times, that really all of humanity and all of creation is tied together and our fates are intertwined. And he chose to use the metaphor of a garment for our destiny. And this is just one of many, many examples. Like I chose social fabric as the title for the zine, because it is a tidy and delightful pun. And it also is, like when we say the social fabric, the fabric of our society, that's extremely foundational. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's a fabric metaphor, or things like the fabric of the universe, the fabric of space-time. And if Max was here, they would be able to give some more etymological details about why that is. I don't quite remember them, but it just feels like we can understand the world through textiles. And that is just clear in all of these different ways that different people have expressed that, that connection. Slide, please. I have, and one more quote. I know I'm committing some PowerPoint sins here with a huge block of text, but I'm going to read it out loud and slide you to have it to reference. This is a quote from William Morris. Anyone know who William Morris is? Would anyone like to describe this man? Or I can also do it.
His design is behind the,
Yes, it is. So the background of my slides, another PowerPoint sin, very busy background image, but I could not put William Morris in this presentation. He was a textile designer and craftsperson. He was one of the main figures of the arts and crafts movement in the 19th century. He lived in London. He was also a socialist, and his philosophy has been really foundational to me. Just thinking about like what I want for the world, what I think is a good life. And as you'll see in this quote, he thinks about art and life and work as very important pillars of and important things that everyone should have access to. Good, fulfilling work that doesn't put people in harm's way, and that produces results that people can really be proud of and feel good about. So I'm going to read this quote that really undergirds all of social fabric and all of my arts practice and the way that I hope to live. I tell you, I feel dazed at the thought of the immensity of work which is undergone for the making of useless things. It would be an instructive day's work for any one of us who is strong enough to walk through 2 or 3 of the principal streets of London on a weekday and take accurate note of everything in the shop windows which is embarrassing or superfluous to the daily life of a serious man. Nay, the most of these things no one, serious or unserious, wants at all. Only a foolish habit makes even the lightest minded of us suppose that he wants them. And to many people, even of those who buy them, they are obvious encumbrances to real work, thought, and pleasure. Next slide. There's only half of it. But I beg you to think of the enormous mass of men who are occupied with this miserable trumpery. From the engineers who have had to make the machines for making them, down to the hapless clerks who sit day long, year after year, in the horrible dens wherein the wholesale exchange of them is transacted, and the shopmen who, not daring to call their souls their own, retail them amongst numberless insults which they must not resent, to the idle public which doesn't want them, but buys them to be bored by them and sick to death of them. Here's the kicker. In buying these things, 'tis the lives of men you buy. So this rewired my brain when I read this. And in part because this was in 1877, things have just really snowballed with regards to
You can see
this.
us now.
I'm like, oh, William, if only you knew. This kind of helped me to understand the kind of the tragedy of industrialization and of alienation, like in the way that Marx was talking about it. People are alienated from the fruits of their labor in a sort of assembly line style of production, versus a craftsperson who really like can learn a trade and learn all the different parts of making a chair, for example, and have creative control over this chair and then sell it at a fair price to a person who will use it and cherish it, versus somebody who's like screwing the same screw in the assembly line. Whatever is coming out at the end of the assembly line is really not connected to this person's spiritual well-being. And so I think the best example of the way I feel like William Morris appears to be feeling it in this quote when I'm standing in the checkout line of Joann Fabrics, which is a store that I generally like to avoid as much as I can. But there's all this like plastic crap that is just there because people will see it and grab it. And when you think about all of the labor that has gone into producing those and shipping them, and not just human labor, but the resources from the earth, I start to really freak out sometimes. Because it is such a distraction from, I think, the things that are really what life is all about. So this quote really shaped social fabric because it made me think about all of the different things from all around the world that go into creating something like this. Before it even got to me, before it even got to the thrift store, like when it was in its original store. it had been touched by so many human hands. It had been, you know, all garments are sewn by hand. I don't know if everybody knows this, but there is not, you can't like feed fabric into a machine and it spits a shirt out at the other end. Even if it's machine sewn, somebody is there touching it and moving it through. So things like fast fashion where you can buy a $2 t-shirt or things like that. When you think about the human cost of those and what it takes to make something cost that little money, and especially when it, like, you know, all the work that goes into creating something that then kind of disintegrates and puts plastic into our waterways. I'm kind of just ranting at this point, but I'm trying
Go for it.
to get to the fact that I think that this is why I think that focusing on textile objects is really important, because they're not inanimate objects. They have an animacy that comes in part from all of the people who have poured parts of themselves into it. And I was like, I need to tell everybody about this. So that is part of why I wanted to create Social Fabric and invite people to really think deeply about that in their own objects, and plug into this concept. Slide. So this was kind of a theoretical framework for Social Fabric before I knew it was going to be Social Fabric. The zine came together when I joined a group called the Creative Community Leadership Institute through Springboard for the Arts. And I was part of a cohort of artists from all around Minnesota and the Dakotas, a really diverse group, urban, rural, older, younger, like a really valuable experience. And we were given a mini grant to do some kind of community-based art. We were given a theoretical framework that we shared about ways that artists can shape society from the ground up, like thinking about Ricardo Levins-Morales's philosophy of tending to the soil so that seeds can flourish. We're trying to kind of create good soil, cultural, social soil, where movements can thrive for change. So my project for CCLI eventually became Social Fabric, and that is the crucible in which I formed this. So this is the flyer that I made that I put up around town in coffee shops and arts organizations. My goal was to get as wide of a sample size as possible. And you can see the prompt here, which I'll just read off, which is using the artistic medium of your choice, tell the story of a textile object that is important to you. What is alive in this object? Whose lives has it witnessed? And the parameters were just anything that can be printed in a zine. So I got some, or I was soliciting like visual art and poetry and essays and anything. I wanted to leave it really open-ended. One thing about me is that my undergrad background is in sociology, and this really felt like a sociological project, just without the kind of rigid methodology. So best of both worlds. And I wanted to be really intentional about my methodology as far as gathering submissions. My goal is not to represent a really specific community, but to get a really broad cross-section of the Twin Cities, but also I got a lot of submissions from people who live out of state as well. So it was less about representing a particular community and more about like being super curious and trying to highlight the ways in which this topic can really unite people across differences. So yeah, so the process of this, actually, I'll talk a little bit about the process of soliciting submissions, because I learned so much from it. Like pretty much every part of this project was something that I had not done before, at least not on my own. And I thought it would, I thought DIY meant like DIY, like everything has to be you. So that's a lesson that I learned, is that sometimes delegating is good. But I learned that I became much more outgoing when I had an arts project to share. And I could just walk into an organization and say like, hello, this is the thing I'm doing. I'm inviting you and all these people here to be involved with it. And here is a flyer, and let me know if you have any questions. And I made a lot of friends during this process and artistic community that I didn't have before. Just by asking these questions and shooting my shot, and it was great. So in some ways it created a community. It wasn't representing one community, but a community formed around this project. Go to the next slide. So I put up my flyers, I did some social media advertising as well. And I was like, well, hopefully a couple people want to make some stuff for me. And I received 30 submissions.
Wow.
And I didn't want to reject any of them, so I put them all into my zine and it became 60 pages.
Oh gosh.
And I was blown away by the variety and the quality of submissions. Something that I was really moved by was that plenty of artists and plenty of textile artists wanted to be involved, but also a lot of people who don't consider themselves artists at all. And in fact, both of my parents, my dad and my mom, who maybe will join the Zoom eventually if she's not on here already, wrote submissions. And is it fair to say that that's kind of outside of your comfort zone or something that you want to do? And that was exactly what I was hoping, that people would see this prompt and not feel like, oh, well, I'm not an artist, so this is not for me. I really wanted it to be something where people would see it and say, oh, I have something to say about that. And so we can pass these around. I brought copies. This is my very last copy of the first issue of Social Fabric because I distributed all the rest of them.
Oh, wow.
So we can pass this around if you want to.
How many, did you say how many you printed?
I printed 50.
50. Oh, nice.
It was more expensive than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Because it is a book. And so there's a copy in the Hennepin County Library. There's a copy in the Textile Center Library. Springboard for the Arts, many other places that I'm forgetting. And these I wanted to distribute for free. I mean, the majority of the run just went to the people who submitted them because it was 30.
Yeah.
But I really wanted this to be something that you didn't have to pay to experience, especially because I was getting a grant. I wanted it to be by and for community members. Yeah, and I think something that I think I had some ideas in my head of what people were going to submit, even though it was a very open-ended prompt, and my goal was to get people's like really authentic reactions to it. But even so, I was like, oh, well, someone's going to do like their grandma's doilies and someone's going to, and I had certain things that I was kind of hoping for, again, whether or not I would have admitted it. And I was just pleasantly surprised by so many of them. And people were really thoughtful. People really understood the prompt. And then people also took it to places that I didn't anticipate. Oh yeah, so this is maybe a good time to introduce my friend who I brought. This is something that I made during the process of, at the kind of very beginning of the process of doing Social Fabric. I made this in a class that I took at the Textile Center about gender neutral stuffed creatures or something like that. And it was about really intuitive pattern making. And so I went in with just a bunch of old fabric from my stash and came out with this creature that I'm like really attached to now. And it kind of became the mascot of Social Fabric. So, and I can pass, this is the second issue that I'll get to in a minute, but we can pass it around just to, get another idea. So I think of this as kind of the manifestation of the animism of clothes and fabrics generally. And yeah, this is kind of like the aliveness of your textiles in animate form. So if you're seeing those guys on the pages as I'm passing it around, that's kind of what they're there for, and also just to add some visual interest. So this was the first issue, and at the end of it, I was exhausted and also knew immediately that I wanted to do another one, and so I did. And for the second one, we can go to the next slide. The second issue, I decided to focus it a little bit more with a theme, and I chose gender and sexuality. I had a number of different ideas for themes, but this one seemed especially prescient because as I was beginning to work on this, we were seeing an uptick in anti-trans legislation around the country in different state governments. It's not something that has ever been not on the radar, but we're seeing a cultural milieu in which there's a lot of anxiety around people's gender expression and the way that trans and other gender non-conforming people are becoming scapegoats for a number of societal issues that obviously do not have anything to do with like what clothes people are wearing or what bathroom people are using, but that's something that can be really preyed upon by powerful people. So it seemed like a good time to explore some of the complexities of gender and textile and sexuality and textile, which is related but not the same thing. So I did a similar process. This time I didn't have a grant, so I was self-funding / using pre-orders to pay for the run of printing. And I got about 20 submissions for this one. And again, was really blown away. And I think, again, realized that I had some expectations for what the submissions would be like. I was like, yeah, you know, the first shirt that I bought that was gender affirming, or, you know, the dress that I had to wear as a child that I really hated, or like various things like that. And I got plenty of things that were like objects that I never could have even anticipated as being part of this theme. And then also sometimes I would get submissions where it's like, yes, this is an object that I would have anticipated someone submitting. But the way that they took, you know, the direction that they took their write-up was totally different than I anticipated. So just like repeatedly during this process being delighted by the variety of people and the variety of submissions that I got. And just like really into learning about people through their special textile objects. So I think what I will do is I want to make sure that we have some time for the audience participation, but I'd also like to read a little bit because I've just been talking so much about how the project went, but I'd love to read a little bit. I think I saw, yes, I'm going to grab my copy that's over up there on the shelf. I think I'll just read the introduction from each issue, and then after that we can do some show and tell. If it's going on for way too long, just let me know. So this is what I wrote to frame the first issue. And this was, I found one of the hardest parts was writing my introductions because I felt like summing up a project that is really enormous in my mind. So here's what I came up with. And the epigraph is, do you have a shirt that you really love? One that you feel so groovy in? You don't even mind if it starts to fade. That only makes it nicer still. Donovan, I love my shirt. When I was a teenager, I bought a jean jacket from a thrift store. I bleached it, embroidered on it, and sewed on patches in an attempt to make something that was truly my own. Each stitch felt like I was imbuing the jacket with power. The power of creative expression, self-actualization, and most of all, care. I don't wear it anymore, but I'll probably keep it forever because my teenage self and her budding identity as a queer woman live in the warp and weft of that garment. At the same time, I know that the jacket lived a long life before it got to me, and the memories of its makers, sellers, and wearers all live alongside mine. This is only one of the many textile objects that has had a profound impact on my life. This project came about because I knew that if I have stories like this in my life, others must too. I was curious about the stories, memories, and connections in the textiles that live in our homes and next to our skin. How does this object connect you to other people and to the earth? What truths are revealed through your object? What is its power? I decided to reach out to the wider community with these questions, and you answered. I was blown away by how many people responded to this prompt and with such care. In these pages, you will find stories about all kinds of objects, handmade and mass-produced, special and mundane, decorative and utilitarian. Each one has endless truths to reveal. Each one is buzzing with life. Drawing attention to our favorite objects illuminates the fact that these things don't just spring into being. Each one was made by human hands. So often these processes are invisible to us. We are alienated both from the fruits of our labor and from the people who create our vital goods and beloved objects. The more I think about the work and the materials from the earth that go into creating these objects, the harder it is to think of them as disposable. If our textiles hold lives within them, how does that change our relationship to consumption? to labor, to one another. Taking a little extra care with the objects in our lives can help guide us to a more just and sustainable world. As you take in the stories in this scene, I invite you to consider the hands that have touched your favorite textile objects and the threads that tie us together.
Mm.
So that's kind of a more concise way to say everything that I've just been saying this whole time. But I wanted to read that because I think that, yeah, just gets to the crux of what I'm hoping to achieve with this project. And I want to read the introduction to the gender and sexuality issue too, because this one took me even longer to write. And because I was realizing I had a lot of anxieties about how I was presenting the concept or the intersection of gender and textile. So I'll just read it because I think that kind of gets into what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere between collecting submissions and compiling them into the scene, I came to an unfortunate realization. I was really sick of talking about gender and sexuality. How could this be? This topic has fascinated me for my entire life. My social, political, professional, and academic lives have been fueled by my curiosity about how gender and sexuality shape our societies. It was a natural choice for a topic for this zine, not least because of the surge of laws across the US that target gender and sexual minorities. The intersections with the topic of textiles are rich and varied. Contributors responded with beautiful, thoughtful, and diverse pieces to my prompt. And yet, I could not muster a fuck to give about this project. The truth is that I was not apathetic. I was afraid of relying on cliches and perpetuating an individualistic and commodifiable view of gender. Textiles have tremendous power to construct gender or sexuality. One example of this is the icons on bathroom signs, where woman is distilled into one who wears a dress and man into one who wears pants. In this instance, the clothes literally make the man. Most people's salient experiences with gender, sexuality, and textiles are with articles of clothing. My clothes have allowed me to express and experiment with a wide range of gendered experience. They've led to euphoric, affirming, and liberating experiences. They've also showed me how certain gender roles felt really wrong on me. They've allowed me to obscure and reveal parts of myself, physical and otherwise, in ways that have shaped my life irrevocably. I want to celebrate the role that textiles have played in the development of my identity as a woman, but there's a fine line between celebration and commodification of my gender identity. Big business is hip to the fact that people don't always want rigid distinctions between men's clothes and women's clothes. Do I want more accessible clothing options that allow people to feel comfortable and affirmed? Certainly. What I don't want is to imply that the solution to gender questioning or dysphoria is to go to the mall and buy a new gender. Adding a non-binary section at the Target will not set us free. That has taken on some new meaning in our current anti-DEI era. This exposes a central paradox of this project. Textiles are special, imbued with magic, alive. This I believe deeply. But many of them are also consumer products made by people who are being endangered and exploited. The clothing industry is a source of enormous pain and suffering in the world, most often for women, who comprise the majority of garment workers worldwide and are the most concentrated targets of predatory marketing by the fashion industry. The biggest thrust of social fabric is to expose how textiles in our lives connect us to the people who make them, how they are made, and the earth that all humans and other species share. If the project fails to place individual experiences of gender and sexuality in the broader context of an exploitative capitalist system, it undermines that mission entirely. Of course, the other dimension of this prompt is sexuality, related to gender but distinct. Both gender and sexuality are inherently relational identities, but that can be easier to see with sexuality than gender. Sexuality implies a relationship between a looker and a looked upon, someone touched and touching, the interpenetration of the body. With that in mind, thinking about desiring, obfuscating, signaling, revealing, dressing, undressing the body for one and another, how might we rethink textiles and gender in light of textiles and sexuality? Much of my sexual journey as a woman has been about trying to awaken my agency and my own desire. How is it different to adorn yourself in a way that awakens your own sexual desire rather than someone else's? In what ways does it feel the same? Textiles can help us understand new dimensions of our sexuality, and they can reinforce mainstream ideas of what it means to be sexy or what a person needs to look like to be desirable. They help us relate to one another, invite connection, enforce boundaries. This applies to other kinds of textile objects as well. Like the hanky code of the 1970s or the AIDS quilt of the following decades, textiles can indicate or even create community. All that said, I needn't have worried. The contributors to Social Fabric explored these experiences in all their complexity. They do not present textiles as inanimate or as decontextualized objects used to express gender in an individualistic way. These submissions reveal a two-way street. They're a kind of collaboration with these items. One can learn from a textile by putting on a garment and noticing how they feel, how they look, how others respond when they're wearing it. And then, in turn, people shape the garment by creating wear and tear on its surface. Like the textiles themselves, the submissions in this issue are desiring, obfuscating, signaling, revealing, dressing, and undressing for you. If there's anything I'm asking, it's that you love your textiles a little bit more. To think about the life that went into them, to use them as long as possible, and to treat them with care. On a practical level, this reduces your need to buy more stuff, extract more materials from the earth, and exploit more labor for new items. On a social emotional level, I strongly believe that this practice can reduce feelings of alienation from others in the world. Instead of thinking of your beloved textile as a dead, flat, decontextualized object, remember that you are holding something in your hands that was made by somebody else's hands. If a textile has taught you something about yourself, honor it and the persons who made it. Understanding that has greatly enriched my life, and I hope it will do the same for you. So now I have talked so much. I'll take a pause here. Before we get into group sharing, does anyone have any questions or reactions that you'd like to share right off the bat?
When I give to you something I make with my hands, I give you a piece of my heart.
That really resonates with me.
I thought it would.
Are you doing another issue?
Yes, certainly yes. It has not begun, the process has not begun yet, but I would like to do all the subsequent issues I would like to have a theme for. And I have some ideas for themes. One is ritual, and I'm kind of feeling like that might have to be the next one. Ecology is another theme, but I would be very curious if anybody here has a theme that they would like to see Social Fabric explore. You know, let me know at any point during this presentation, put it in the chat, because this is a project that is owned by the community, which means you. I vote for ritual, of course. Yeah, I'll be heavily soliciting United people for the ritual issue.
Aesthetics of religion.
Ooh. What are religion?
Aesthetics of religion.
I think that there could be some room for that in the ritual issue, but also it's distinct in some important ways.
And I was thinking about community, which is sustaining us at this particular moment in time. Especially.
Absolutely. Mark says, I'm really interested in mending as a practice. That could also be part of ritual.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And I think that's something that I would like to, that's one of the things that I'm like always secretly hoping that people are going to talk about in their submissions is an object that has been mended and remended, because that really ties into my core value of care for objects as care for people. Like if you're taking the time to mend a garment, or, you know, I lean towards garments because I am obsessed with clothes, but this is not just about garments, this is about all kinds of textiles. But, you know, something that to mend something after using it is really to respect and honor the makers of the original thing. So I think there's so much there.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of costumes and how they might make us feel, or what they might mask or transform us into when we think about putting on something that would not be typical everyday dress.
I'm getting a pencil because I don't want to let these ideas get away.
Oh, of the people.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting distinction between costume and daily dress. And I think I'm somebody who likes to blur those lines a lot. And yeah, like there's a certain, and I know from my friends who perform in drag that putting on a drag look is really like to transform yourself and to really inhabit a different persona. And I think that's true. That's one of the reasons that Halloween is such a freeing experience for so many people, is that you get to be a different person for a night. And that the garments you put on are doing that kind of alchemy to allow you to be an avatar. Super interesting.
I was thinking of that theme of transformation because in the same way I watched Conclave recently, and you know they put on these garments and it transforms how they show up at these events and you know what they're doing. Sunday mornings people put on garments. The whole notion of how garments transform us, I think is really, you know, invites us into something that's beyond us.
That is such a great insight, and that is bringing up a memory of reading the book Things Fall Apart in my high school English class, which takes place in Nigeria, I think. And there's a scene where the main character is participating in a ritual and puts on a mask. And when he wears that mask, he is the god that the mask is representing. It's not a matter of he's dressed up as this figure. He becomes that figure when he puts on the mask. And I think that maybe buried a seed deep in my psyche about the real transformative power of that a garment can have. And the conclave example, I think, is a really great parallel to that.
You know, they say people act as if, and so people put on a hat or a tie or whatever it is to act as if they are the things maybe that they don't feel like they are.
The most clicked on article in the New York Times day before yesterday was why people never dress up to go anywhere anymore.
Oh, wow.
The most clicked on article in the New York Times. And it was kind of a counterpoint to that reality.
I'm gonna have to look at that.
Yeah, me too.
The New York Times also made a big deal about Kendrick Lamar wearing bell bottoms at the halftime show at the Super Bowl, and I saw that headline and I was like, "That's what you're gonna focus on." But now I'm like, why did I write off this textile article without even clicking on it? So maybe I should.
Well, when you said Halloween, I thought, boy, is that what you're talking about? Like we grew up making our costumes. And then when we got older, it was, you know, gathering items to transform into some character. And now it's so commercial for most people.
Yeah. What's the fun if you're not making your costume or at least thrifting your costume?
And it's like this fast. You know, you want to be a this where you get the interpretation of whatever that character is, or so many of them are characters from the media, instead of this whole creative process.
Well, we should probably shift, and you know, I welcome any more questions, thoughts, insights as they come up from folks. But I would love to move into some sharing. Would anybody in the room or on Zoom like to present an object? Oh, and we can go to the next slide that has the reflection questions on there for reference. Yeah, just want to open it up. I want to hear about your beloved textiles and take some time to love them. Molly's got a beautiful
Liturgical stole with chili peppers. The other side is books. This is made by Sandy Johnson, who runs Women of the Cloth. This was unsolicited by me, but she learned that I love to make theological chili. So what is alive in this is imagination and love and friendship and a lifetime of clothing women in liturgical garb. Made by hand, not commercial. She has a little artisan shop in her house in South Minneapolis. It has life in that I wear it for Pentecost services, which is a different, approach to tongues of flame. I also wear it to ordinations, as red is the color for ordinations, and this is just a little whimsical thing to show up at ordination.
Thank you so much. So special.
When you showed the book part of it, what came, especially in your current role here, is keeping that flame of the spirit in the academic, which is so much in books sometimes, which sometimes it doesn't feel like that flame of the spirit. So when you turned it over, that's what I thought.
And when somebody puts on one of these, they expect you to do something or know something.
Yep.
Hopefully be something.
Thinking about Pentecost and the Holy Spirit just feels very resonant with social fabric and the spirit within textiles. I think that's a lovely little connection.
The last stole that I purchased was one that Dawn Carlson Kahn made. Dawn is also an excellent seamstress creator. And it was made of all sorts of ribbons. And I wore it when I did my niece's wedding. And that has a very fond memory for me. And I remember when Kathleen Raymond was up in front of the chapel service, I said, "Is that a Dawn Carlson Kahn original?" But when I was thinking about a piece that meant something to me, I thought of a piece that Sue Swanson, who's an alum, invited us to create. I don't know if you're a part of that. And we all created these little pieces that were this big, so super accessible. And then we made one for ourselves and one that she sent in to be part of this larger piece. And that is such a powerful memory for me, because it was like, I can remember what it was for me, but I also know that it belongs to another larger entity of pieces.
Like Madeline Sue would say, the one become many and the many become one.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to respond to everybody because I want to. I love pieces that are like made by many disparate people and then sewn together. And I have in the gender and sexuality issue a little write-up that I did about the AIDS quilt. And I think that community quilts are a really super potent example, like a metaphor made real of people coming together of solidarity. And the AIDS quilt in particular is really ginormous. And you can see pictures of it stretched over the National Mall. And it was a way to show that just like a lot of people care about people who are impacted by HIV and AIDS in a time when the government was showing callousness and deadly lack of care. So yeah, just like knowing, like having a piece that's part of a larger whole is something that's really special. And it's, I keep saying metaphor, but it feels like it's something that is more concrete than metaphor. It's like
Sacramental, maybe.
Sacramental, yes.
Sacramental.
And as someone who does a lot of community art making, the AIDS quilt is what planted the seed. I was there when that began, and it's just stunning, the power of that particular quilt and the pieces.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
And any community quilts, like I've seen multiple community quilts in support of Palestinian liberation. There's the Olam Haba quilt that was made locally. That's now on view at Curiosity Studio. And yeah, I just think that you can do a quilt for any occasion. And I think it's always, it can bolster solidarity and community. Who else has a special object to share with us?
Well, as you were talking, I was remembering, and this would have been back in the 90s, when United was up in Brighton, we did use the metaphor of quilt for a chapel. And we invited people to bring in quilts. And the stories were just incredible. So that was fun. So this is the most recent piece that I created, and Cindy Beth posted the call for the artist, and the Wisconsin Council of Churches for Lent has created a study guide focusing on repenting from Christian nationalism. And they asked artists to submit for one theme. So this is the piece for Palm Sunday, and the theme was domination. So they can pass it around and people can make it bigger, and the center is like the pathway after Palm Sunday procession. So that's the most recent creation.
I'm so excited to see it.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing.
And then I thought of a crazy quilt that I don't remember how many great she would have been, Aunt Sarah May from the 1800s.
Oh
That
my God.
travels with your roots. That whole connecting of harmony. Oh, no, where has this quilt been tucked away all these years?
That makes me think of a presentation I came to here from some folks who did a community quilting project in the wake of George Floyd's murder.
Yes.
I assume some other folks here were here for that.
Yep.
And one of the objects that was brought in was a small quilt made out of little circles that had been made by one of the people who were involved in the project's grandmother, I believe, while she was enslaved. And they had this piece of art that was made by someone who was going through one of the hardest things that someone can go through. And I felt chills in its presence. I was just like so moved to see this object that had survived and been cared for like throughout many years of history and anniversary. Oh my goodness, this is beautiful. I'm sorry, did you make this yourself or was this a collaborative project?
This was myself. Most things are collaborative, but this wasn't.
This is really stunning work. I love the cobblestone kind of texture that you used here.
And this was when I was up in Alaska, and my friend Julia was sorting through her fabric and reorganizing it. And right on top of one of the piles was that fabric with stones. And I said, can I use your stones?
Sorry to everyone on Zoom. I wonder do you think it would probably be kind of hard to get this into the chat from your phone, right?
You can email it to me really quick if you have.
I was going to say.
I just feel like people should get to see this.
Or you can just hand me your phone and I'll email it to myself.
Oh, well, actually, it's in an email, so I can just forward it to you. I'm trying to pull it up.
I wonder if people are needing to log off. I'm okay sticking around a little longer, and anyone who would like can. I have on the next slide, I have like my just contact info and ways that you can connect. So I can put that up, and anyone can let me know if you want to go back to the prompts. But if you want to hear updates about Social Fabric, the best way to do that is to follow me on Instagram. Unfortunately, I would really love to get off that platform. But if I do get off that platform, you'll hear about it on Instagram. So Blood is where you'll find me. I have a website as well, socialfabriczine.com, and you can download a digital copy of each of these for free. And that's also where I have a number of copies of the gender and sexuality issue if anyone wants to buy one. No pressure, obviously.
Are these your business cards?
These are stickers. If anyone wants a
those are- I
sticker,
couldn't tell.
and it has the website on it. You can also email me, socialfabriczine@gmail.com, if you have questions or like want to order one or want to submit something to a future issue. Yeah.
I have to share that I have this sticker on my water bottle. You know, I have many stickers on my water bottle, but I was down in Early Childhood Center last week, and one of the kids looked right at it and said, "What is that?" and I could not answer him because I wasn't sure, but now Allison has explained it to me.
I got a really funny message from Melissa that was like, someone asked what this is. So what is it?
Can you put the contact information up again? Is that what you're
I'm
doing?
gonna put the
Okay.
photo.
And
in.
oh yeah, and that sticker in particular is this little guy, but he's wearing Divine's outfit from the film Pink Flamingos, and that one is courtesy of Max's Photoshop skills.
Yeah, there he is.
And I have some here for person.
I need to go. Thank you, Allison. Good to see everybody. Bye.
Here we go. Hey, folks. It's coming. Here we go.
Okay.
Thanks.
You know, Allison, I was able to do the CCLI when it was at Intermedia
That's great.
Arts. And when you talked about that again, I just thought, oh, it's just like to be able to have space and be with other artists and just try things. I mean,
Yes.
how much I think all just long for that.
Mhm.
And I'm so excited that you did that. That's so cool.
It's one of the best things I've ever done for sure.
That's how I still feel.
And so it was hard going on the website. I had to like pull some stuff for my resume or something, and to see it all in past tense on the report website was like, oh. I think that there are other initiatives that they're doing that
Yeah.
are fulfilling similar things, but CCLI was very
It
special.
was so cool.
Well, thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank
Yes, thank you. This
you.
was really delightful.
Be excited for and stay tuned for the next issue and,
Yes.
you know,
Like all of them,
we'll
it's gonna
happily
happen slow.
circulate it for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful.
The call, I mean, and
And I should leave you all with one of these, because I don't think there's a copy yet.
yeah, can add it to our archive.
I'll put it with the
Yeah.
other intersection copy.
All right, so
Thank
yeah,
you so much. Yeah.
Yay, thanks everyone for coming. Sharing, and I'll stick around for a few more
Yeah,
minutes.
I come when I can. Yeah, so what was your